I get to do this again. So 2022 is my second full season racing dirt ovals, and with it came my second provincial championship in a row. I guess I have a bit of a following now from all the motorsport game stuff and other sim racing content over the years, so this might answer some questions as to what I get up to when I'm not making video games or being angry at video games on YouTube. So, for starters, I race four cylinders. They're a class at pretty much every short track in North America. Our province of Alberta has a touring series for them, and this season was spent driving a 2005 Pontiac Sunfire Coupe, which I won my first championship with last year. It's got a 2.2 liter Ecotec engine in it, which is pretty common for GM products of the era. It's got a 4-speed automatic transmission. This is important. These cars also come with 5-speed manuals. We'll get to that in a bit. I run BF Goodrich radial TAs at a size of 225/65 R14 on Bassett 14-inch rims. I put Petro-Canada Ultra 94 in the car. I run Stage 2 comp cams, a cold air intake, an ECU from TBG Tuned, a Dodge Caravan right rear hub because these cars suffer from pretty violent hub failures and have a tendency to roll over. I've cut out the front sway bar in the car, and the roll cage and the overall assembly were by guys named Justin Horton and Rick Parento, who have 3 four-cylinder championships between the two of them. So the first question I get asked is, why am I racing Sport Compact? Our series has a pretty abnormal concentration of highly experienced drivers and just well-built cars, and we're all doing this because it's absurdly cheap. If I'm racing at Rad Torque Raceway in Edmonton, which is 30 minutes from my front door, it's $35 to enter, it's $20 in fuel, the car only burns about 11 liters a night, and like 15 extra bucks if I grab lunch before driving out. Your tires and rims last several seasons, and while I bought new tires for this year, I didn't necessarily need to. It was just an ego thing. If you don't break anything, which I typically don't because I'm not a retard, price-wise it's on par with indoor go-karting. We're also on the bill everywhere. This year from May to September, we ran 22 main events, with each event also having 2 heats. That's 66 green flags. It's a pretty crazy amount of track time and close racing against fairly good drivers for almost no money. Everyone in this class knows this. Sim racing has taught a generation of race fans that you're a nobody unless you're in GT3 or NASCAR Cup, and that you only race in rookie street stocks to get out of rookie street stocks as quick as possible. But in real life, it's the exact opposite. People make pretty respectable careers out of racing the amateur stuff. That's where I'm at. Anyways, car quirks. What kind of bullshit did I deal with this year? So, the power steering on any J-body product from this era, so Pontiac Sunfires and Chevy Cavaliers, is just garbage. Both the pump and the rack will go at some point. The pump is connected to the camshaft and it doesn't like being spun to 7 grand constantly. There's actually a hilarious video on here where a guy claims his pump failed after getting stuck in the snow and just spinning the tires up a few times. That's how bad it is. And if the pump doesn't go, the rack goes. This thing drank Rizlone stop leak. A quarter of a bottle would get me 8 laps at a time and the power steering would fail constantly over and over during the course of a race. I'm not the only one in a J body, so there were a group of us hoarding stop leak from like Walmart and Canadian Tire all season. And then it would just puke it all out, evaporate, and the heat generated from this would cook my legs during the main. There's a good shot of me leading my buddy Nicholas later in the season, and you can see the plume of power steering smoke behind my car. This was actually normal. I always got a kick out of the safety guys running over to me after pulling in from a race and having to calmly tell them, I'm not actually on fire, this is just the power steering, please chill out, do not spray shit all over my car. What was a bigger problem, however, I installed an aftermarket cold air intake, but it sat right over the throttle cable. The hood pushing the air intake into the throttle cable caused the throttle to occasionally stick wide open. This almost killed me at Rad Torque one night, so for the rest of the season I ran without the hood. So, competition. What am I racing against? Sport Compact or Mini Stock Racing at this point in time is basically Need for Speed Underground or a Forza D-Class lobby. People will rip by you in like Acuras and Ford Focuses, which is hilarious. Now, in 2021, I admittedly had the quickest car on the grid, but what sim racing doesn't replicate is how people upgrade their stuff every year. At most, the closest we get in the sim racing landscape is someone will come next week with a slightly better setup. In real life, the improvements made from season to season are actually pretty drastic in an open series like this. This season for 2022, I was probably the 6th quickest car, and I'll power rank them really quickly. There was Tyler in his 5-speed manual J-body, Brian in his 5-speed manual J-body, Cole in his Acura Integra, Chase Tom in his Fox body Mustang with a Cosworth power plant, Terry in his 5-speed J-body, and then me in a 4-speed automatic J-body. This season was going to be extremely difficult because with less gears, my gears are therefore taller and my car just doesn't build RPM like everybody else's does. The Stage 2 cams only come into play around 4,500 to 5 grand RPM, but the trade-off is that there is no torque in the lower part of the RPM power band. This is a good example. The initial race start from one of our non-points races, I get roasted by Stephen Woods in a stock Ford Focus. At the flag stand, I'm 3 car lengths behind. On the full race restart after an opening lap yellow, where I'm intentionally getting on the throttle and trying to jump the start, I'm at least at his door. That's how bad my takeoff is, even when intentionally jumping the start, and how much the car bogs down if I don't get the corner right. So it behaves kind of like a turbocharged car from the 80s when turbo technology just wasn't quite there yet, and I watch everyone by default gain a car length on me off the corner because the gears are too tall. I should not have won any races at all this year, and I'd have to drive super precise just to keep the car in the proper rev range and keep up with the top 5 cars. Getting slightly more sideways than I needed to be, which as you can imagine happens a lot on dirt, or simply missing the 5-foot window in which I absolutely needed to apply the throttle, would kill all the momentum I'd built up in the motor and cause me to lose 3 to 5 car lengths on the car in front of me. And I would somehow have to keep this up lap after lap for anywhere between 20 and 35 laps with failing power steering that would just stop working at any moment on dirt, while I'm jumping ruts, navigating lap traffic, and trying to figure out where the dry line is. Anyways, since these cars aren't in a lot of racing sims, or any racing sim, what is driving a mini stock on dirt actually like? It's actually a lot like European touring car racing, especially some of the lower end stuff like Renault Clio Cup or the off-brand cars in Automobilista 2. You'll know them when you see them. Sometimes I go shit on kids in race room ranked lobbies because the wheel and pedal inputs are exactly the same even though it's asphalt road racing. Dirt has a lot more grip than you'd think, especially when the track dries out. It's basically an asphalt track with a lot more slip angle under braking. The downside is you get pretty beat up and tired in the car because it's not a smooth surface like it's depicted on iRacing. You are constantly hitting ruts and little bumps and subjected to just constant vibration. Factor in power steering occasionally fading, I'm pretty tired after every main. These cars lose the nose all the time in the corner and almost immediately overheat the right front, so there's a ton of tire management at play even in short races. And as you can imagine, these aren't heavy-duty late model A-arms, these are passenger cars. If you touch a guy with one corner of your car, the fender's automatically going to fold in and cause a tire rub, or you're just going to fuck up your alignment like crazy. So because of that, the running order can change substantially in just a few laps. Rear-wheel drive cars are at a disadvantage in this stuff because they really don't have the weight or the horsepower to bite the rear end into the dirt and make the car turn. It just yaws out and you kill your run. And that alone kind of equalizes front-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive builds in this stuff. One thing sim racing doesn't model, it's actually really easy to roll tire off the rim by just hitting a rut at a funny angle. We're not allowed bead locks, but ruts or just odd bumps can blow tires. This is something sim racing doesn't model even in asphalt racing. You can hammer curbs with reckless abandon on the computer. Do not do this in a real car. On to the 2022 season. So I didn't run any onboard cameras this year, so some of these will just be pictures. Last year, some of you guys know that I was out of work for a while and was dealing with a stalker. Racing was my outlet away from that mess for a few hours, hence why I went like all out on YouTube videos and stuff. It just gave me something to do. This year, my goal was to just go out and enjoy racing, and the fact that everything is over and worked out in my favor. I mean, your boy was partying with an OnlyFans girl to start the season. I was trying a radically different approach here. So, I swept opening night after showing up in a U-Haul because I don't have my own trailer. This is my favorite flex. By the end of May, I'd won twice, the second being a pretty wild battle running down one of the 5-speed manual J-bodies in my automatic, in which the entire track slicked off to the wall, and I ran the wall like Kyle Larson. I look pretty gassed and like a spurg in these photos. I was screaming in the car after winning because I didn't actually think it would work, and it did. This photo is from later in the season against the same guy, but it was basically this, except I was higher up by the wall. We had 2 races like this. I won the first in May, he won the second in July, and then I went winless for 3 months. This is a spreadsheet we use to track entry lists and podium finishes with the non-points races in bold. I was getting killed by the 5 speeds, but you'll notice I still ran as consistently as I could. When you run a standard Cup Series points format, no playoffs or stages or any bullshit, third place finishes in the dog days of summer are more important than wins. Matt Kenseth figured this out back in 2003, and that's why we have the playoffs in the first place. Me not getting demoralized by quicker cars who were stealing the show and just running to finish third built me a pretty disgusting points lead. I admittedly could have been better though. The second race of the season I blew a tire in the main trying to catch my buddy for the win when I should have just sandbagged and taken second. And then there's this incident where I had the heat race one, then looped it because the track was wet. This is the first time I've ever spun a race car. and it was basically because we had a crazy amount of rain the night before and I accidentally got the right rear in a strip of water. I could have done without this. 2022 also marked the second time I've taken flight in a stock car. Back in 2018, I launched off Kendall Thomas for my first late model podium, which I don't know how they deemed this legal, but they did. I went for a similar ride in my Sunfire when Terry lost a nose in the corner after hitting, I presume it was a water puddle, and I climbed his tire. This actually messed up my shoulder, and I couldn't get out of bed properly for about a month. They made me a really nice commemorative sticker, though, for my helmet. The third win of the season was probably my favorite, however. With 2 races to go, I put on a clinic on a dry, slick track against the 5 speeds, led every single lap, and was like questioning in the car why nobody had passed me yet. Again, knowing how slow my car is under 5 grand RPM, my line had to be perfect for 20 laps straight just to keep momentum built in the motor. This iced my second championship with 1 race remaining on the calendar, so that was pretty clutch. And I did it on a U-Haul again. So after 2 seasons of sport compact racing with the same 2005 Sunfire, I've racked up 2 championships, 9 feature wins, and 27 podiums and 37 starts for a rate of 73% podium finishes. This is all pretty insane considering the number of wrecks or equipment failures you typically see in amateur oval racing. This car should have blown up on me by now, or I should have at least gotten in one catastrophic wreck. Instead, I have a handful of dents at most, and it looks more or less how it did at the start of 2021. And this is how it's going to stay because, unfortunately, I'm going to crush this thing into a cube at the end of the month, as I too have joined the 5-speed manual brigade. Drove down to a town just outside Medicine Hat last week and picked up my own 5-speed manual Cavalier. Since it's just the General Motors J-body platform, all of the race parts in the Sunfire will just get stripped out of it and put into the Cavalier. Now, to reward you guys who stuck around for 12 minutes to listen to me ramble on about mini stock racing in Alberta, I want to talk about my favorite part of the season. As someone who identifies predominantly as a sim racer first and a real life racer second, my favorite part of the 2022 racing season for me has been avoiding some of the social nonsense that comes with sim racing. NASCAR and sim racing have both been infested over the past couple of years with theater kid types. By comparison, at the racetrack, nobody is wearing cat ears and a tail. Nobody's wearing a wig and asking you to call them a different name. One of the heavy equipment providers uses the Rebel flag as their logo, and you can see it on a couple different race cars if you walk around the pits. Nobody cares. Nobody says a word. This is not an issue. My city's football team renamed itself because they ambiguously decided the word Eskimo was a slur. Yet the racetrack in Edmonton has a nice Eskimo Auto Parts billboard. Nobody cares. Nobody says a word. This too is not an issue. In the heat of the moment, people flip each other off on the racetrack or shout expletives if they bang their hand while working on their car. Nobody comes flying across the pits, threatening to file a protest and get them banned from the track for a week due to foul language the way iRacers file protests. It's such a breath of fresh air to not have to walk on eggshells among theater kids out at the racetrack. It's almost depressing when the season ends, knowing that all you have is sim racing and it's back to walking on eggshells.